So we're going to talk about recovery today, and I think this is a really important topic because, there's a lot of injuries in pickleball. Or you hear about it a lot in the media, but pickleball isn't inherently a dangerous sport. It's like any other sport where if you go from 0 to 100, pickleball is an addictive game, right? So like your best friend takes you out to the court, you start playing, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I'm really sore. And then a couple weeks later you get an injury. And so we're seeing some things in the media about the injuries, but it's kind of unfair press. If you were to play 0 to 100 in basketball, you'd experience the same thing, or running, it doesn't matter. It's agnostic to the sport. But people want to recover faster so they can play more with their friends, right? So they can be on the court and enjoy this amazing game. So we're going to talk about that today. I'm going to let our panelists introduce themselves, and then we're going to get right into it. And listen, I'm going to leave some time for Q&A, so if y'all hear something that's like, wow, I really want to ask a question about that, just write a note, and then we'll give you guys time to address those. So here we go.
Hi, I'm Foskaris. I'm a nutritionist, and I have a holistic wellness center in California, and I have a lot of pickleball players that come in for recovery, so I'm always helping with that, so thank you.
I am Dr. Jacobs with Elevate Physical Therapy and Training. I've been a physical therapist for about 2 years now, and I'm also a certified strength and conditioning specialist. I've worked with amateur, semi-pro, and professional athletes from football, soccer, pickleball, all the above, so I've seen all kinds of things from all different aspects.
And I'm Tammy Lee. I am the co-founder of Onyx Cool Therapies, a plant-based cooling technology for pickleball injuries. And the rise of pickleball injuries is doing great things for my business, but not great things for our players. So hopefully we'll all learn some great recovery tools today.
I'm definitely the odd woman out on this panel, and that I'm not a therapist or anything like that, but I'm Rachel Chonko, editor-in-chief of Peak Media. We're a business resource for the fitness industry, and so I can speak to what I'm seeing in terms of trending recovery modalities and health clubs and pickleball facilities and how they're kind of monetizing and packaging those services.
Awesome. So we got a really diverse panel here. My background, I worked in the NFL and college football for about 16 years as a performance coach and sports scientist, and my job was to help elite athletes stay healthy and on the field. And those athletes were getting paid millions of dollars, so getting one injury could ruin an entire season. I was actually part of an NFL team that lost their franchise quarterback, and it totally tanked everything, and everybody got fired. So it's a different world, right? But for people playing the game, getting injured and missing 3 or 4 months on the court, that can be devastating for their physical and mental health. So the first thing I want to start out with is this idea of load management, or managing their time on the court. So are you hearing about how facilities are addressing this issue? How are you talking to your patients or clients about hey, I'm a beginner, how should I address starting on the court and ramping up my time? I think that's probably the biggest bucket issue to start with, is just like any other sport, how are we managing our time on court and balancing that with all the other stressors and inputs in our lives?
Well, one of the things I suggest is, especially because I see them after they've been injured, is let's look at how can you prevent this to happen again. And it's really taking care of with their fluids, electrolytes, and stretching, and looking at all the different things they can do so that they are slowly starting on the court, like you said, and making sure that they are not, I was practicing for 2 hours, and I was at the 150 mark, I was done completely because I didn't stop right away. So even for myself, I have to manage my own time. But it really is a starting, and then teaching them, as you'll probably talk about too, is the basics and what we need to do to prevent in the first place, because they will have to see you in rehab if they don't do the right movements in the beginning.
I would say first and foremost, it is all about creating a really strong foundation. And if you have a strength program, a fitness program that you are consistently doing as a maintenance program, it is going to be so much easier to recover from an injury if and when that does happen. Because one of the things I've seen as a physical therapist is people who go into the hospital for a knee replacement or a shoulder replacement or a hip replacement, and one of the things they force you to do before you can leave the hospital is they want to see you walk 150 feet, they want to see you go up and down stairs if you have stairs at home. If you've been doing a strength program before that, it is so much easier to get to that point, right? And just like on the pickleball court, if you are playing pickleball 10 games a day, right, and you're not doing any strengthening, it is going to be so much harder to get back to playing 10 games a day after an injury if you're not doing any type of strengthening. So that's what I would say first and foremost, is making sure that you have a really strong foundation so that if and when an injury does happen, it's a lot easier to come back from that injury.
So we do a lot of partnerships with hospitals and ASCs. So a lot of people first encounter our Onyx Cool products when they're getting ready for a surgery. They're past that injury point. They've already done that damage. So our surgeons and surgical partners recommend us as part of that prehab program while they're waiting to be able to go in for their surgery. And they're telling them to take it a little easy on the court. The problem with telling them that is that nobody wants to listen to that, because pickleball is such a dopamine hit to our brains. We all like it so much that people want to be able to keep doing it. So I think it's both. It's stretching, it's prehab, and then it's making sure that you're managing your time on the court.
From my perspective, for facility owners, I think what I'd keep in mind is just your onboarding, making sure that a beginner who comes into your club is paired up with someone who's also a beginner, so that maybe if they're with a 5, they're not like feeling pressure to extend themselves or do something that might risk injury. And then also just consider, your risk management and liability policies, because, it is a sport. Some people might and probably will get injured. So just make sure you're covered from a facility management perspective.
And then I would also add, in regards to a player, be honest with yourself. Don't let yourself get to the point where, I tweaked my calf, I'm going to play through it, right? Let yourself be limited to the amount that you need to limit yourself, right? There's no reason to push through this, especially when you're not being paid millions and millions of dollars to play the sport. Let it be something that you love to do. If you're a pro player, sure, push through it a little bit, but then make sure that you're getting the adequate recovery. But if you're playing it recreationally, let you limit yourself to the point where you can recover and then get back to playing the sport that you love.
Yeah, so I just want to kind of recap something here. Like when it comes to recovery, like we're talking about prehab. So like if you have a physical fitness regimen already in place, then I always look at like what is the cost of the thing that I just did, or the cost of training. So if I'm physically fit and I'm doing resistance training, which we all need to do, and then I go play for 60 minutes on the court and I've been playing for a while, recovery's like, that's not really you've adapted to that. Does that make sense? But when you microwave and you go from nothing to 2-hour sessions, it's going to cost you a lot. And that's really what recovery is your body's trying to adapt to what it was just exposed to. So I think the one thing I pulled out of this is like, you need to have some other foundational things in place, like warming up, resistance training, stretching when you're done. And then like the recovery component, like it's not quite as big of a deal. If you're playing 3 times a week for an hour and a half, it's really not that big of a deal, especially if you've adapted to it. Now, there are things that we can do to help speed up recovery, though. Like, let's say we're preparing for a tournament. Like, we want to go play in a tournament like that's going on behind us, and we're starting to prepare for that. There's things like sleep. There's nutrition. So let's talk about the things that we can be doing to kind of speed up the recovery process.
Yeah, so definitely we need to eat a proper diet and actually finding out what we really need, because a lot of times people think that they know what they need to eat, but unless you get a body composition analysis done on a professional machine, you don't even know how many calories you need. And you have to take that baseline and then you have to add it to your activity level so you can see where you're at. And when you go below that baseline, and actually if you're playing, the 2-3 hours, that could be another 1,200 calories you just burned on top of what your basal metabolic rate is. And so you need to prepare and have your fuel with you and actually fuel through the week, and having the hydration, and just getting prepared for what you're gonna do and play. So.
One of the things that I've seen my athletes have the most benefit from in a recovery aspect is manual therapy. So that's what I've been doing all weekend at our booth, is just hands-on therapy. The technique that I use activates muscles all throughout your body, so that if we know that you have a knee issue, we're going to work on the muscles around your joint so that those muscles can better support that joint as you play your sport. Because if you're walking around with knee pain and your quads and your hamstrings aren't working like they're supposed to, then that joint is going to be super, super unstable. The technique I use activates those muscles so that as you're playing, you're using all the muscles available to you so that you can get better faster, and when you get back to playing, you feel a lot better and you perform better.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because one of the things that's really important, activating those muscles all around too. With cold therapy too, we recommend that 360 cooling. So with a product like this, you're going to get the back of the ligaments and tendons and muscles, not only the knee where you actually are experiencing the pain. So it is treating all of that area, because it might not be localized to the point that you're talking about it. We also recommend sitting with your Onyx Cool thing and a glass of red wine before the night before a tournament to help you relax and get ready for the next day.
Yeah, I think consumers in general are very interested in recovery, and they're listening to a lot of things, reading about it, whether it's Huberman, other podcasts. And so we're seeing health clubs and pickleball facilities bring some of those modalities into their, brick and mortar studios, because they know that that's something that consumers are interested in. So that examples would be cryotherapy, seeing a lot of interest there, cold plunging, saunas, red light therapy, compression therapy, percussive therapy, you name it, lots of therapies. But yeah, I mean, consumers today I think are very interested in that, and they're incorporating a lot of those modalities into their fitness regimens and health routines to help them recover quicker from exercise and strenuous activity.
It's really interesting, Rachel, that you mentioned Andrew Huberman. Does anybody know who Andrew Huberman is here in the audience? Okay. Do a lot of pickleball players listen to Andrew Huberman?
A lot of people do, so I would assume that,
Yeah. I'm just curious, because, to me, I think Andrew does a good job. Sometimes he gets way out of his lane, though, and he talks about things he doesn't really know. Andy Galpin actually was on my show, my podcast. I know Andy very well. But, some of those protocols are a little crazy.
Yeah, and I'm not here to speak to the validity of anything, but people are hearing about it.
Yeah, that's the point I'm trying to bring up here is there's a lot of stuff out there. There's a lot of things you could do, but what's the most effective, right? So the most effective things that everybody can do are physical training off the court, getting enough sleep, hydrating, making sure that when they're done playing that they're cooling down, and then doing different types of they got to improving mobility, things like that. I think we start getting into all these crazy protocols. It's interesting to me from a business perspective. What are people trying to monetize right now? So what are people paying for in these facilities? And where is the information coming from? What's the pipeline that's coming to these facility owners? And then what are you seeing the trends are that people are willing to pay for? I'm just curious.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously in the pickleball industry, I don't think it's necessarily there yet. But if you look at the health club industry, so trade shows, recovery offerings, cryotherapy, very big. So that's where a lot of the business owners are getting their information. Red light, people who do red light, people who do percussive therapy. And so they are being told that, this is benefiting your consumers, your end user. And so this is something that you should incorporate into your business. So a lot of them are doing recovery zones. And so if you're a member of a pickleball club or a health club, there'll be a dedicated area of the facility that has water massage beds, cryotherapy, percussive therapy. And then usually what they're doing is you have to pay a additional, tier of membership to gain access to those recovery zones. And so for a business owner, it can be a great way to generate revenue. So. Or you could do, yeah.
What the trends are in the B2B space.
Yeah, or you could, sell the services as just a one-on-one thing. I want to do one cryotherapy session, so I'm going to pay $20 for that. And some of the cryotherapy is very expensive on the front end to buy, but to run, if it's an electric system, it's cents on, it's a few cents a day, and so you can potentially make your money back, pretty quickly.
Right. And to that point, I work out of a bigger gym, BioFit Therapy-Based Fitness. We have an infrared sauna. We do, obviously, hands-on therapy. And we do it because we educate our people on all the other things first. Because what we know is that so few people are getting the amount of sleep that they need. They're not getting the correct nutrition. They're not getting the personal training and strength coaching that they need. And if you're not doing that, doing all this other stuff is like worrying about what kind of oil is going into your car, but you don't have wheels on your car, right? You're worrying about the wrong things at the wrong time. So we try to educate our people on personal training, nutrition, sleep management, so that when we offer the infrared, it's because they actually need it at that point. It's not just something to make money in this space.
Something I just add to that too is like what you're saying is 100% accurate, and like there's no quick fix that's gonna fix if you're, have a poor diet, if you're not sleeping well, etc. But there is a large segment of the health and fitness industry that's been overlooked, that 80% we kind of talk about in the health club industry that's never been a part of a pickleball group, a gym, and it can be scary to kind of become a part of that. And so on the wellness side of things, what they're seeing is these services are kind of a soft entry to get someone into doing something that maybe truly is valuable to their health and fitness in the long run. So, whether it's valid or not, it's still getting them into a health and wellness mindset.
What I think is great about this pickleball movement, though, is it's the great equalizer, right? People that have not played a sport in their lives can pick up a pickleball paddle and be good at it in short order. So I think it's bringing a lot of people into health and wellness, and that's what's really exciting about this sport. What's also really interesting is that there's no amount of money that people won't pay for the right gear. I'm wearing this cool Pickle outfit from another vendor. Infrared treatments, we do warm spas that we sell as well. People are technophiles in this space. They're addicted to the equipment, quiet paddles, infrared, Pickle outfits, fancy shoes. So everybody that comes into the space thinks that that's going to give them the edge, and it's great for businesses. It's growing a whole new cottage industry of businesses and vendors, but it does come back to the basics. But for those people that don't want to do the basics, they're looking for the quick hit with infrared.
Yeah, I think long term it's behavior change. Like that's really what's going to change things. And I think to your point, it's like if it gets them in, if it hooks them in, and then we can start creating positive change in the other parts of their life, then it's totally fine. Some of these things, there's no, like the research doesn't back them. There's evidence-based practice, like what's in the scientific literature, and then there's practice-based evidence. Like in physical therapy, my wife's a physical therapist. Some things as a therapist, like you've been working on an athlete, and you're like, there's not a lot about this in the literature, but I know that it's making an impact. There's some things that I'm concerned about, though, that are getting sold to people, and we're like, that's really not doing anything. But the great thing is like we're solving a lot of problems right now just by getting people to move and exercise. And I can't say the university yet, but we just got funded by a major institution, and they're doing a study with us because we've actually been able to validate and show, like, hey, when you play pickleball, there's changes in your physical and mental well-being. And I think that we're going to start seeing in the literature coming out probably the next 5 to 7 years that this sport's going to have it's going to create a ripple effect in longevity. Because it's the one thing about the sport that's very unique is you have the close proximity to people. And so like you get the mental health benefits. Or even tennis is great, but you're very far apart. Or in the kitchen, like you're so close to somebody, every point there's an interaction. And so it's a really neat time. And I think that's also the reason people keep coming back. So recovery in of itself, it's like the social interaction. There's something we don't know about quite yet, like how it's impacting the global biological system. But I don't know. It's really exciting to see what's going to be coming down the line. Let's talk about the mental recovery. People play in tournaments. They're playing in a tournament right now. And they're going to go through 3 days. They're going to play, back to back to back. If you go play like a World Pickleball Tour event or whatever, you're going to go singles, doubles, mixed doubles, and then you're dead on Monday. Does anybody have any thoughts on like the mental recovery side and what you're seeing in the space?
Well, I think that a lot of times, I hear a lot today that they're back to back and they're not giving themselves the time, and then they're having to actually skip a tournament that they actually wanted to go to because it's been too much even on their mental health. So I think honestly when someone gets started is to teach them and tell them that, hey, this is a priority as well. So that way you can, like, we have like light and sound therapy classes in the clinic. So if somebody can't shut down their brain and actually or refocus, because even in between for 10 minutes, sometimes you can't get focused and you're so mentally tired. Honestly, in 10 minutes, they just put them on and they can refocus again and have that clarity to actually be able to play in the focus, because you need that focus. So there's tools we can use, or meditations, or just even finding a quiet room and getting away and recovering even for a little bit, and actually still with the mental recoveries, having the nutrition part of it in your brain as well, because if you're so mentally drained and you have nothing in the tank to feed it, you're not going to recover. So yeah, it's important.
I can't speak much to the psychological, emotional, mental wellness portion of it, but I can speak to the your eyes moving, how tired you are, like thinking about where your opponent's going to go, and like thinking about how your game is. One of the things I work on with a lot of people is vision training, so making sure their eyes can move appropriately, because pickleball is so much about how your eyes are moving, how fast you can track a ball. So doing a visual reset where I have people, if you hold this for just a second, just doing like a visual reset. So just palming your eyes and just letting yourself sit with your eyes closed for 3 to 4 minutes. That's going to let your eyes reset so that when you get into your next game, your eyes aren't drained. Doing visual tracking drills so that your eye muscles are really strong. Doing another visual reset where you shutter down your eyes and do you can do colored lenses where like blue lenses versus green lenses versus red lenses, and all those have different neurologic benefits depending on the color. So there are so many tools that you can use based on neurological drills that can make a massive difference in the mental aspect of a game, not necessarily from the emotional psychological aspect, but from a how fast can I observe, orient, decide, and act on what my opponents are doing.
So I love that you both gave these great examples of the things that you can do in like 10 minutes, because I think that's so important in between the matches. I do think that there is a lot of research around the infrared heat therapy, that full immersive kind of pod sauna experience that dates back to the Finnish, doing the sauna treatments, because that does get your blood pumping through your body, it gets it pumping through your brain, and then that helps with sleep. So there is a lot of good research on that for people that can do those kinds of treatments, but I love these short kind of in the moment ones that you're talking about too.
I think the only thing I'd add to a mental health component would be just considering if you're a business owner, your employees' mental health. That's obviously been a huge trend since COVID. So, just check in with your employees, make sure that you're a lot of you are going to be small business owners that are asking a lot of your teams. So just make sure you're checking in and make sure you're not asking too much, and that you as a business owner as well are prioritizing your own mental health and well-being, that you're taking breaks, that you're spending time with family, taking time to play pickleball recreationally, because I know a lot of you obviously love to do that. So that would be my only probably 2 cents on that.
I'm going to transition to my last question, then we're going to have a little Q&A. Recovery innovations. Like, what are we hearing about that's pretty cool, maybe fringe, maybe it's been used in other sports, it's getting introduced to this sport? What do you think's real? And if you want to talk about some stuff you think's bogus, that's totally fine. Like, I think it's good to also know what you should be avoiding.
So I'm going to talk a little about red light therapy, because actually we have used in the clinic, and I actually manufacture red light therapy devices as well, and I made them to reduce inflammation about 15 minutes so people can get back onto the court. And even this whole weekend we had people like put it on 15 minutes, go play, and their knees still better, or their back's better, they're bending over, but and they couldn't bend over first, and now they can. But there is research, and so looking at the different modalities out there, like what's bogus, what's not, how many lights are on a device, and actually feeling to be like, don't buy things until you try. Like, I'd be like, don't even buy this until you try it. Like, we have people that go out and test them on people, because you're buying something and a lot of times it sounds good, the marketing's fantastic, but it doesn't work. So really do your research on the products and try things when you can, because there are, again, a lot of bogus things, but there are a lot of things. I love red light therapy, EMS, cool therapy as well, and just to get out there again and keep playing.
I'm not going to lie, I thought red light was bogus until I started doing all the research on it. So I would say no matter what it is, whether it's red light, infrared, neurologic drills, vision drills, sensory drills, do your research on it, or find somebody you trust who will do the research for you, because there's so much that I'm learning that, going through a traditional physical therapy curriculum, we learned one thing, and then I get out of school and we learn so many other things, right? And one thing seems bogus, and it might be bogus, but then you start looking in the research, and it's like, okay, well, that if I do this, it creates this change in this neural pathway or this physiologic change. Okay, so that makes sense. Okay, well, they're saying this, and that doesn't do anything, so why am I doing this? So do the research, try to understand why something might work, and if you can figure that out, then go ahead and do it. But there are so many different trends out there, and I'm sure you can speak to this as well. There are going to be things that do work, there's going to be things that don't work, but allow yourself to do the research so that you know why something is working and why something isn't working.
So our company is primarily cool therapy, a 58-degree plant-based phase change material. There's a lot of research that says 52 to 60 is at right temperature. You were probably taught about icing, the rice method from 50 years ago. The doctor that was the inventor of that method for rest, ice, compress, elevate, has now gone back on that, and he said that is not the way to do it because ice is too cold. So I think finding things that are safe modalities are really important. But people ask me too, what's better, heat or ice? And it depends. So even though I've got an ice-based company, heat is really the right modality for a lot of treatments too, especially infrared heat and light. So I think there are so many great things out there. You just need to make sure that they're safe trends that are happening today.
Yeah, I think a lot of the trending ones have been mentioned. The one I haven't heard, and again, I don't know about the validity of anything, just what I'm seeing, potential businesses incorporate is IV therapy, where you have a registered nurse coming in and doing intravenous nutrients and vitamins. Again, no idea about the science behind that or if it's, actually beneficial. I think one thing I'd suggest is if you kind of want to see what's trending, there's a franchise called The Covery, and they specialize in only recovery services. So you could kind of look there to see what they're doing to kind of get a glimpse into some of the new modalities out there.
I'm going to just touch on IV therapy. It's actually not bogus. I mean, especially if you're really dehydrated, you probably need to get that IV therapy done. I know that it's helped a lot. Even with my son, he was so dizzy. He was in the hospital years ago. Like, we couldn't even get him out until we did like 2 bags of IV because you have to get it internally. Because when you drink your water, your hydration, you're not absorbing it. So you really want to, and you can get nutrients in. You can get, different vitamins in the body really fast. So just make sure it's a qualified person doing it. Absolutely. That's, of course, a no-brainer. So.
Yeah, I think registered nurses are required.
Yeah, you want to be really careful. When I worked in the NFL, we would do IV fluid in hot environments before guys would practice, but we'd have like an EMT come and do it because you could flood along and be in a medical emergency. But one of the things I think I mentioned in a previous panel that in 2016, with some of the teams I was with, we started using blood flow restriction. That was fascinating. I'm always skeptical, but it was coming out of work with vets, guys coming out of theater, and they were trying to figure out ways to rehab with low intensity. So like instead of lifting heavy loads, they could lift very light loads, but they would use occlusion cuffs, and their literature on it is absolutely phenomenal. I started experimenting with myself. The head of sports medicine for one of these teams is a good friend, and we go walk every Saturday. So we're talking, I was like, hey, what's new? He's like, Erik, the stuff on BFR is unbelievable. I really think it's going to make a push into pickleball because you have aging populations. It helps with joint pain. I'm predisposed to tendinitis. I have the genetic SNP, so like if I'm not careful, I'll get tendinitis. And I got tennis elbow, and I was just having a really hard time managing it. So I got some of these BFR cuffs. In 6 weeks, it was gone. I went through one of the protocols and one of the papers I found. So I'm really excited about the implications of that. So does anybody have any questions about recovery that we could potentially talk about? Any burning questions? Yes, sir. Yeah, that's a great question. That was my doctoral work. So a couple rules of thumb, like generic rules of thumb that anybody can use for this thing. You never want to increase your exercise volume more than 10 to 15% per week is just a general rule of thumb. So if you're exercising 100 minutes a week, you would not want to go more than add 10 to 15 minutes the next week, because your body can only adapt to so much stress in so much time. Does that make sense? So it's a safe kind of limit. Also, like now we have all these new wearables, right? So I'm wearing an Oura Ring and an Apple Watch. You got things like heart rate variability. That's an indicator of how your body's adapting to stress. Well, now we have these new tools that, like, if you combine wearable data with psychometric data, like how am I feeling today, you can create very intuitive systems. That's what my company does, AIM7, where we're like, hey, you can only adapt to this much stress today, and so here's what you should do based off of your historical data. We started doing research on this 10 years ago at the University of Kentucky. Actually, it's longer than that. And we found that athletes, like you could create a training program for an athlete, right? Some athletes would train for 8 weeks and almost see zero improvement. And that's sad. Can you imagine that? Why? Because you got all these other stressors coming into your life, pulling out what are called adaptive reserves. You could have a stressor from a relationship. As an adult, you could have financial stresses. You could have family stresses. So if you can adapt your exercise daily to how your body's adapting to stress, we found that athletes would have the same exact program. They would have changed their training daily based off of how they were adapting to stress, and they had between 100 to 500% more improvement over an 8-week period of time. All it was is just adapting your training daily, and so you're starting to see these more adaptive systems. So the basic rule of thumb is slowly increase, no more than 10 to 15% week over week. And then if you have a system that kind of gives you like, hey, today's a good day, you should bring it up a little bit. Today, your body's not adapting as well. It doesn't mean you can't go out and perform well at your job, but maybe that's a day to dial it back. Those type of intuitive systems, to me, is the future of performance. Anybody else?
I think that was very well said.
That was perfect. I think that was great. Did that answer your question? I think that was perfect.
Okay. Anybody have any other questions on that? Anything? Well, hey, thank you so much for showing up. We really appreciate. Yes, sir.
I have one more.
Okay, one more.
One of the things you said that was the idea of bringing in a person data like a watch.
Yeah.
Do you have recommendations for apps that do that well? I know you're representing a company, but that make the combination of like how you feel with
We literally the only solution in the market because we pioneered that technology. So like some of the actual CEOs of some of these companies use our product because we are the recommendation engine. So right now we are it. But the reason we were able to pioneer this technology is because we actually did it with the Department of Defense and with elite athletes. And so now we're bringing that to the public. But just for your note, like some people wear these devices and the problem that they have is they're well-intentioned companies, but it's objective data. It doesn't measure how you feel. So it may say you're a 90 today, and you're like, I feel like garbage. Or it says you're a 20, and you're like, I feel amazing. Wearable data is a lagging indicator. Research demonstrates that how you feel in the moment is actually how your body's adapting to stress. It's intuitive. So when you can combine the two, then you have a very intelligent system. Does that make sense? So I would just say this, no matter what your device says, always go with how you feel.
Well, my device says I'm under incredible stress and I'm editing and all that.
Yeah. What it's doing is it's not probably calibrating to your norm. So it's using a range and it's saying, well, this is what you should be. And you're like, well, this is my norm. This is how I've always been. That's a problem. And so, if there's something where like Apple says you have AFib or something, you need to go see your doctor. Yeah. But and Apple will say we don't do that, but they do. But you know what I'm saying. So always kind of trust how you feel, and then if there's something that you need to double check with, go see your physician.
I was just gonna say I actually took a look at their app, and it's you really need to look at it, and you get is it like 50% off the first month, and it's so inexpensive. It's going to cost you like $3.50, I think. I mean, but I looked at it because I'm always looking at what else, for my pickleball players, my patients, everybody in the clinic. And I looked at it and I thought it was pretty amazing. And you can tie it into your wearables so you have the data. So
Thank you. I appreciate you saying
you're
that.
welcome. It's really true.
Anybody else?
Doesn't answer your question about an app, but I would say at a bare minimum using like a readiness journal, so tracking how much sleep did I get today, what does my nutrition look like today, how do I feel today, so that tomorrow or a week from now when you're feeling like crap, okay, what did my last 5 days look like? Did I sleep like crap the last 5 days, or did I sleep really well? If I slept really well, okay, that's probably not the problem. How did my nutrition look? How did my exercises look? So if you have data, whether it's through an app, whether it's through a journal that you personally keep, the more data you have on yourself, the better you can hold yourself accountable to what's going wrong and why it's going wrong.
Well, thank you so much for attending today. I hope you guys have a great time at PickleCon. Take care.